Hello, this is Professor David Bishai, and I'm here to give us our lecture on equity and health. I'll be starting this lecture on Part A. The outline for today is to go over, first in Part A, the limitations of the traditional economic model of why and how people care about other people. We'll go over the Edgeworth Box and understand its limitations because there are many things outside of conventional economics that we need to care about in order to talk about equity. In Part B, we'll move beyond utilitarianism. We'll entertain the theories of Professor John Rawls and Amartya Sen, and then talk about the rule of rescue and paternalistic altruism in health economics. In Part C, we'll talk about solutions and policies that might end health disparities. We'll compare targeting individuals one at a time to blanketing groups millions at a time. We'll talk about the role of public health departments and how their future lies in community engagement. So let's begin in Part A with why we want to talk about health disparities. And they are immense in every country. The U.S. is no exception in terms of having health disparities. However, our health disparities are notable and driven by race. What you see here is a set of 4 line graphs showing the difference in the mortality rate at various ages, from age 40 all the way up to age 65. And you can see that the mortality rate is highest for Black American men at every single age group, and lowest for Asian men of every single age group. And you'll see also that the mortality of Hispanics is superior to that of whites. So disparities between race and ethnic groups have been a long feature. I would note that the disparity for males tends to give Black men a disadvantage younger in the life course. You'll notice that at age 40 and 45, they are displaced upwards at having higher mortality younger in life. And obviously, we need to explain this. The causes of death at the life of a young Black male include much more homicide than the other age, race, and ethnicity groups have been exposed to. At the end of life, the disparity between African American and white males tends to close. There is a lot of epidemiology focused on the causes of death and the social conditions behind this. Terrific if you're interested to go into those other courses. We will talk about the economics of these health disparities, and obviously there are health disparities by race and ethnicity. There are also health disparities by gender. And here you can see the women versus men disparity. Now we're not going across the age course, now we're going by income percentile. Each dot is 1/100th of the income percentile, and the 99th percentile household in America obviously goes well above 500,000, but its median is 500,000, and the bottom of the income distribution is close to a few hundred. So you can see that women outlive men by about 7 to 8 years. That disparity between women and men closes a little bit as both genders get older. So women do have a mortality advantage better than men. And if we decompose the causes of death, cardiovascular disease is a large contributor later in life. And for men younger in life, the disadvantage for men comes from injuries, both intentional and unintentional injuries. The other part of the second figure is, of course, there are income disparities by household. You see that the richer a person in America becomes, the longer their expected age at death is. And if you are extremely rich, sort of above $180,000 income, right about the 70th percentile, 80th percentile, that's about all income will do for you. Little bit of a gain of maybe a half a year or so if you get richer than 180,000. But the big gains come from going above a few $100s a year up into $100,000 a year. That's worth about 10 years of. Now on to economics. These are the disparities that populations exhibit. Do we care about them? And if we care about them, why do we care about these health disparities? Let's talk about the issues of justice and equity from an economic lens. Let's talk about dividing a pie. Pie is the simple, objective, physical manifestation of something that has to be split up among many people. How do you go about dividing a pie? Usually we use principles. It's not obvious that the only possible principle would be dividing this pie into 8 or 9 or 10 equal slices. There are other principles, and here's a quiz question for us to think about other principles for dividing a pie. The quiz says, what principle would you suggest to divide a pie among 10 equal people? Okay, so as you saw, there were multiple possible principles to divide a pie, and not one best answer. Here's Cicero's answer. Cicero says that all of these debates that we have about how to divide things in economies can be summarized as two possibilities. He says that we can call that which is equal just, which is an outcome-oriented approach. Or we can call that which is just equal, which is a structure or process-oriented approach. So what you see happening is in definition A, you look at the outcome, you count off how much pie is everybody eating, and you only focus on who is eating what, and you use that definition of the outcome to say that is the definition of what is just. In definition B, you look at the rules and the principles in the pie dividing enterprise. You say, is that rule fair? Is that rule fair? Is that rule fair? And you only look at the rules. And then if you like the rules, you don't care who's eating what amount of pie, and you say, I looked at the rules, it must be just, and it is equal, end of story. So that structure process-oriented approach is the great debate. And in left wings of political systems today, and not just the US, but in other countries, there's going to be a group that says, we focus on the outcomes. When we bring about the question of how to divide pies, we look at who's eating pie, and the rules aren't that important. Method B is that associated with the right wings of political groups who say, really what matters is the principles and the justice of the principles. We will look at written principles and say, if they look fair to us, we don't care what happens anymore. That's the right wing. Along this political spectrum, you could see the life course mattering, because younger people would be more attracted to method A. If you're young, you don't know how much pie you're definitely going to have. Maybe, rarely, you might have a big bequest coming at you. But most people don't know how life is going to treat them, and so they want an insurance policy, and they say, hey, watch me and make sure I don't fall through the safety cracks. If you're older in life and you know you've made it and you've got a nice lifestyle set up for yourself and money in the bank, then you're able to say, hey, I just care about the rules. Don't take my stuff. Don't tax me. Don't take my money. I want to emphasize how fair the process was because, look, I made it. And so right-wingers are much more likely to have more established incomes. So that's the background from Cicero, showing you that this great question of justice is a 2,000-year-old question. Let's look at debates like this about who has what and how pies are divided through the very orthodox tools of mainstream economics. Let's talk about the simple bargaining game that goes on in an Edgeworth box. And today we're going to talk about the bargain between Ariel on the left, who's the Little Mermaid, and Ursula on the right, who is a blue octopus. And we're going to put Ariel in an Edgeworth box and show you the two things that she cares about. Ariel cares about good X on the horizontal axis, and she cares about good Y on the vertical axis. And you can see from her indifference curves that she is growing in utility as she moves to the northeast. These are utility curves that are getting higher and higher for her. Her best point would be to have way up here at the far northeast, she'd have lots and lots of good Y and good X. Now, in the movie, what Ariel wants is two things. She wants to have a high likelihood of having feet instead of flippers because she's in love with her boyfriend, Eric, who has feet, and he thinks that she'd have a better chance with him if she has legs and feet as well. The other thing that Ariel cares about in the movie is her singing voice. She has a very beautiful singing voice. She also thinks that her boyfriend would like it if she sings to him. So she needs two things to find love and happiness, which are legs and her singing voice. And so she wants to strike a deal in order to get this. Now, unfortunately for Ariel, she starts at a bad point. She starts having a high probability of having a voice, but she doesn't have any feet because she's a mermaid. So what Ariel does to solve her problem is find her friend Ursula, not really her friend. Ursula also wants to have a singing voice, and she has the ability to grant Ariel feet because she is a sorcerer, and she can obviously cast a spell on Ariel in order to provide her these things. And so what Ursula's bliss point is having more of these two goods as well. She wants to have the singing voice on one axis, and she wants to have the work, the labor effort required to bestow spells that give away feet. So Ursula is happiest down here at the bottom left southwest corner of the Edgeworth box. So they start at an endowment point, and that endowment point is E, and at point E we say this is how much of good X Ariel has, measuring from the 0 on the left. That's also the point where Ursula has good X, measuring from the 0 on the right for Ursula. So point E counts up how much of good X they have, and then measuring in the vertical dimension, point E is also the amount of good Y, and good Y for Ariel and good Y for Ursula. So they begin their bargaining with this probability of having feet and a voice for each of them, and they look at their indifference curves, and the indifference curve that goes through point E happens to be Ariel's point indifference curve number 3 and Ursula's indifference point number 4. There they are. They're going to look and see, can they do better if they make a deal? Ariel wants to go up to the northeast. She wants to do better. She wants to get up on this indifference curve A4 from A3. And so once they meet in the Edgeworth box, they see that there are possible trades between them that can help them get more of what they want. Ariel is able to trade some of her X. She has a lot of X and she wants a little bit more Y, and so she's willing to trade off some of her voice in order to acquire a higher probability of having feet. And the same for Ursula. Ursula is able to trade some of good Y for X as well, and that enables Ursula to move down to the southwest. So we can draw in yellow a lens-shaped core of the things where we think they will make trades. We think that they won't trade outside of this yellow core with confidence, that they really, if they're going to make themselves better off, each better off, the yellow core is the place where we would expect their trades to be. Inside that core, there is a possible utility optimizing best deal for Ariel, which is her getting what she finds best, and there is a utility maximizing core for Ursula, where she gets what she finds best. And so we would say that if Ariel has absolute power in the negotiation and Ursula has no power, they'll still be in the core, but Ariel will get the best deal, and if Ursula has the most power, they'll be at point U star, where Ursula gets the best deal, and in between, they'll be in between. You've seen this before in this class. If they have 50-50 power, we would find them in a place where their utility of Ariel is 50% of A star, utility of Ursula is 50% of U star, somewhere in the middle. Now, inside the core, we can draw a contract curve connecting the two stars between A star and U star. That means that if we were to run this experiment 1,000 times, we put both Ursula and Ariel in the box and we watch where they deal, we would see a set of points that would be on the contract curve. These are Pareto optimal points that are best for both, and they would be stable against further trading because we've seen them empirically. All right, so given the tools of economics, we can apply the first and second welfare theorem into the Edgeworth box. And we say, as economists, that if we allow Ursula and Ariel to bargain freely inside the Edgeworth box, they will for sure end up inside the core, because no one is compelling them to do something they don't want to do. They both have power, and so if we require consent to every bargain, they will be inside the core. And the second welfare theorem says if you want Ariel to do better, you have to shift the endowment point. Meaning that if I'm watching this Disney movie and I say I don't like Ariel to have to lose her voice, well, I better start the endowment point somewhere way up to the northeast so that she has more stuff, because if I leave her in this Edgeworth box to bargain with Ursula, I might not like what happens. Now, if you were 7 years old and watching the film, you didn't watch it with neutrality. Most people who watch the bargaining between Ursula and Ariel are rooting for Ariel. I don't know why. Mollusks are nice and octopi are very intelligent creatures. But when we watch the film, we're rooting for Ariel not to be exploited by Ursula. And we don't look at their bargain as a neutral operation between them. And we don't say, well, I guess they made a deal, it's Pareto optimal, Ariel lost her voice and she might not have a future with her boyfriend. We seem to be rooting for Ariel. So something else mattered to us when we were watching The Little Mermaid. We seemed to care for one side of this negotiation. We were able to say that Ursula is evil and the Little Mermaid is good. Something else matters outside of these bargains and transactions. So what matters? There were obviously the situation, the endowments that they started with gave us some sense of sympathy, that Ariel was endowed with features of beauty and attractiveness, and Ursula seemed to not be so attractive to us. There were how we felt about it. These emotional considerations for the two people in the Edgeworth box. The identity was how it defined you or me as a viewer of The Little Mermaid. Imagine your big brother or your big sister saying to you, I'm a fan of Team Ursula. That would define them as not on your team, sort of not on my side. Being a fan of the young and beautiful mermaid makes me have an identity as a good person on the right team. And our identities give us utility somehow. So there are things that are not in the Edgeworth box, things in this bargain between Ursula and Ariel that made us care about the film and how they transacted, so that when Ariel loses her voice and almost comes under the possibility of not finding the love of her boyfriend, we're distraught and upset by that prospect, and we are rooting for her. So we need new economic principles to explain this. It obviously goes far, far beyond the simple Disney movie, and we need to have a new space beyond utilitarianism. So let's go over some 20th century philosophy and bring in Professor John Rawls' Theory of Justice, published in 1971. John Rawls was concerned that the process of dividing pies, the bargaining that goes on, might be the problem. That simply letting individuals say, strike a deal in your box, trade A for B, was the way far from where we could even begin, that was the wrong step. Society should devise institutions and ways of dividing pies other than Edgeworth boxes, and talk about those as rules. So instead of saying, hey, the only way to divide the pie is to put people in a box and have them bargain, maybe there are other possible rules, and he's concerned about how to discover the possible rules that lead to justice. So what Rawls writes of in his book is the original position that is required to find justice. And he makes the case that anybody who's looking for justice needs to be concerned with the identity of who is deciding on the principles of fairness. And he says we should think about people who do not have a vested interest, who do not know what their lives are already like. The veil of ignorance means a situation where hypothetical, rational individuals, not yet born, unborn souls, not yet on earth, fully rational, they're each about to be incarnated in life and about to live full life spans, they're the ones who we should trust with this decision, hypothetically. Let us imagine that they meet, not knowing who they will be, what they will have, where on earth they will be. Let's let them meet and decide in a bargaining game what the right principles will be. They don't know who they'll be. They're the ones to say, and maybe they'll come out and say, yeah, the right principle is to put everybody on earth in a Edgeworth box to bargain with each other. Or they might say the right principle is socialism. Or they might say the right principle is a dictatorship where the king gets everything and the king hands it out. Who knows? Let's wait and see and think about what would happen as this hypothetical group of individuals meets to do bargaining. So Rawls takes off in his book, hundreds of pages in, describing how the individuals behind the veil of ignorance will bargain. And he stipulates we don't want to see them bargaining about who has what, who has the pie, who has the contract with the NBA. They don't bargain about the stuff, they bargain about the rules and the institutions as rules and norms. Rawls says that he's only going to let the game end with a unanimous agreement. So the game that is played in Rawls's veil of ignorance is everybody gets to go around a circle and propose rules of how we are going to have our principles of justice. So let's imagine that we're going at round one. Ursula raises her tentacle and says, I think that blue octopi should be the dictators of our new world, and I should have all the stuff and then parcel it out to you with absolute power. Now, because we require unanimous approval, round one ends immediately because everybody else in the veil of ignorance says, Ursula, shut your mouth. We're not doing what you say. Let's go on to round two. Round two, someone else says, I think this should be the principle. It's discussed, voted up or down. Round 43, let's say Ayn Rand is there, and Ayn Rand says, oh, I think we should solve all the market failures and let the first welfare theorem lead to proto-optimal states of nature. And they discuss it in round 43, and they say, no, Ayn Rand, I don't like this. So somebody vetoes, and we go to round 44, and on and on. Now, in round 583, or whatever, 1,000 rounds from now, John Rawls says, I got an idea. I think this is going to win. This is going to be good. And he proposes two principles of justice, and according to John Rawls, his proposal wins. And everybody in the veil of ignorance says, you nailed it, John Rawls. We're going to go do that. That is the two principles of justice that we were looking for. And he spends this big, long philosophy book describing how his two principles are going to achieve unanimous consent behind the veil of ignorance. So obviously you want to know, what did John Rawls say behind the veil of ignorance? Well, it's in the book, and here is what he said. Principle one is that, quote, each person has an equal claim to a fully adequate scheme of basic rights and liberties. Principle 2, social and economic inequalities can be allowed if A, they are attached to positions open to all, and B, they are of greatest benefit to the least advantaged. This second proposal, B, is called the maxi-min principle. Give the greatest benefit to the least advantaged. So obviously it's a long philosophy book. Principle 1 says, that sounds like justice. That seems attractive to people behind a veil of ignorance. Equality of claims to basic rights and liberties. And so John Rawls goes over, what is a basic right? What is a basic liberty? What do we have an equal claim to? So this non-discrimination, Principle 1, has some attraction. You can see why those that are bargaining behind the veil of ignorance would like that. Principle 2, Rawls is allowing there to be some inequalities. He realizes that giving everybody the exact same claims to things might not work. He says there might be such a thing as private property, but we have to open it to all, and we have to make sure that if we allow private property or wage disparities, they are of greatest benefit to the least advantage. Obviously, a wage disparity. Why would this society allow there to be a wage disparity? They could say that, a Johns Hopkins graduate with a bachelor's degree who has taken this class on the economics of health, if we pay them a little bit more to practice health economics, that could be of great benefit to the least advantage. So that's okay. So paying you a 10% bonus in order to practice health economics out in your country, I could see that. We'll let that happen because it is of greatest benefit to the least advantage. Whereas if we offer you extra money, let's say to play basketball or tennis, we would have to figure out why paying you all that extra money to play tennis was of greatest benefit to the least advantage. You'd have to state your case. So Principle 2 says you can get paid more, and you can have private property, and you can do all sorts of extra claims to basic rights and liberties, as long as it's of greatest benefit to the least advantage. Rawls says behind the veil of ignorance, that gets unanimous appeal. That's the only thing that everybody could agree on as the reason to allow an exception to the rule of equality. Let's give you an example of an exception to the rule of equality. Lincoln Chen, in a very famous paper written about how Bangladeshi families shared food, written in 1981, he looked at family food allocation and he found that adult males in Bangladeshi families ate more calories than their wives and children. Now, some epidemiologists said that's terrible. Oh my God, those greedy adult males, they're just robbing their children of food. Obviously, you get it. That adult male father in the Bangladeshi family was out, cutting sugar cane and pulling a rickshaw all day long. And if he didn't have more calories, he wouldn't make as much money out in his physical labor. So in order to feed the least well-off member of his household, giving that adult male more food was of benefit to the least well-off member. That's okay. And Rawls says, yes, that's okay. That is not injustice to feed adult men more calories in a Bangladeshi family. That's fine. So here's a principle of justice. It goes well beyond saying it is obvious that we have to allow Pareto optimality to exist in free trades between people. It says that we might find policies that don't allow the endowment, that will make some peoples move away from their endowment if we find that this is of greatest benefit to the least well-off. You don't have an obvious right to your endowment, and we might find societies that would question your claim to the privileges that you've inherited through some process that is unclear in origin. You don't deserve your start in life. And some societies might say, we can tax you and take away that birthright if this is a benefit to the least well-off, appealing to Rawls's principles of justice as the rationale for that. So a non-materialistic, it's not all about keeping score about who has what, but appealing to principles of justice is where we are when we look at the philosophy of John Rawls. I'd like to move on to a second philosopher/economist, Amartya Sen. Now, Amartya Sen is a Nobel Prize-winning economist. He actually won his Nobel Prize for a detailed mathematical analysis of the first and second welfare theorems. So he's in our tribe, but he's also a famous and noted philosopher of justice. Amartya Sen has offered a definition of development, economic development, that goes far beyond keeping score in terms of who has how much money. In Amartya Sen's philosophy, development is a society's enabling citizen capability to do 5 things. He says we keep score of how developed a society is by how often people have 1, unhindered political participation, 2, unhindered participation in the economy, 3, access to social resources like healthcare and schooling, 4, being able to contract agreements in good faith, number 5, getting help when necessary. So, with an Amartya Sen lens on keeping score of a good society, we would not say GDP per capita is how we measure development. And right now, if you go to the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund, the ideas of Amartya Sen are very much in place. And no longer do we put countries on a scorecard based on GDP per capita, but we would use a Human Development Index, which is trying to measure these 5 elements of well-being, many of which are absolutely not consumer goods. In fact, none of them are consumer goods. They are both rules and operations of society, as well as socially provided resources. In many cases, healthcare and schooling are socially provided. But the rules and norms of a society are where we keep score, and we do not now use cardinal measures of welfare that you can measure with numbers like 4,700. However, we are asking for movement along these scales of unhindered participation in the full life of a human being. The goal now is to expand the reach of these freedoms in a society. How can conventional orthodox economics, which Amartya Sen fully comprehends, encompass this non-consumerist view of a good society? Let's be a little bit more specific about a case where it's clear that what people cared about wasn't simply the indicators of who has what. In 2010 in Chile, there was a mining accident, and 33 miners were trapped underground for 69 days. They had oxygen, they had some water, but no one could figure out how to get them out until the government decided to dig a second hole parallel to the mine where they were trapped. So they got massive digging equipment, a crew of hundreds of people to dig a second mine within 69 days, and they got out the 33 miners. This picture shows the little capsule that went down this new mine shaft and pulled the miners out one by one. The mathematics of this is that the Chilean government was willing to spend $600,000 to rescue a single Chilean miner. I'm using this example to illustrate what's in our textbook of health economics as the rule of rescue, where we as a society, and you as an individual, and me as an individual, we are willing to pay more of our time and effort and tax money to save identified lives with a face than a statistical life that we can't see and photograph. Let's go into the math of this. Is $600,000 to save a Chilean miner a good price? From an economic evaluation, dollars per life year, these are miners in the middle of life. They would have easily lived an extra 30 years each. And so it's about $20,000 per year of life saved to make this investment. So this is expressing a very modest value of a statistical life year in Chile for $20,000 to save a Chilean life year. Now in the U.S., that's chicken scratch, because in the U.S., when we make public investments to create an additional year of American life, we typically spend $5 to $10 million per life and about $100,000 to $150,000 per life year. So this is a really reasonable outlay for Chile to spend. However, at the time Chile was spending all of this money to rescue 33 Chilean miners, they were still not covering kidney dialysis in their health system. Kidney dialysis was costing $20,000 back then in 2010. And 1/3 of Chileans who had chronic kidney disease were still not covered by the public insurance system, and if they got kidney disease, they would have to die. This is the difference of the rule of rescue. As a politician, what an easy choice it is to go on national television and rescue the Chilean miners. What a difficult political decision it might be to expand the coverage of the Chilean healthcare system for dialysis. So who gets saved? The Chilean miner that you see on the left in the dirty hard hat was on national television. The Chilean people said, "I love to live in Chile. I'm a proud citizen of my country because I know if it was me in the mine, I would be that guy and the Chilean government would save me." Made it on the news. Unfortunately, kidney dialysis, and here's a Chilean woman receiving kidney dialysis, she is not going to get on the news. And the Chilean citizen isn't going to say, "Good job, Chilean government, save me." Kidney disease is a statistical entity in most of our minds, and it is a statistical life that gets saved if the Chilean government says, all right, that's a covered benefit now. So the rule of rescue, if you have a face that can go on television, the taxpayers will want to save you, and they will spend lots of extra money for it. If you are just a number or a statistic, the politicians can't sell it, and it's hard to raise money for that. So changing the mortality rate of a disease by 10% or 50% can save thousands of lives. Changing the coronavirus case count by 10%, saving hundreds of thousands of lives, doesn't have a rule of rescue feature to it. So the rule of rescue makes sense to economists as a violation of the typical way we keep score and utility. These violations are called behavioral economics, and inside behavioral economics, we talk about the availability heuristic, saying that human decision makers are able to make sense of facts if they can come up with stories to relate them to. So saving miners with faces makes it tangible, makes it relatable, and we can make sense of facts, and we can spend money on it. There's also a feeling, participation, utility involved in rescuing somebody with a face. You can feel the good feeling of being a rescuer when you rescue somebody with a face, and you can feel like your government has your back and won't give up on you, even if you happen to have a very expensive VSL, or value of a statistical life. So the rule of rescue is evidence that something else matters besides the numbers of commodities in an Edgeworth box. Last example of violations of utilitarianism come from paternalistic altruism. If you ever meet a pure altruist, somebody must really love you, and I know that you love other people. So if you want to love other people in the form of a pure altruist, you will have this utility function. You will say, do I have utility, yes or no? And the only thing that will matter to you in this decision of whether you're achieving utility is the utility of your loved one or beneficiary. You will only ask, is my beloved having high utility? And whenever your beloved's utility goes up, you are happy, and if their utility goes down, you are happy. You, as a pure altruist, do not care how your beneficiary achieves their happiness. You don't care about X. You leave that to your beloved to choose. You say, choose whatever you like as long as it makes you happy. When I understand that you have achieved happiness, I, as a pure altruist, achieve happiness. If instead you become a paternalistic altruist, you will have the utility function shown below. You will say, my happiness depends upon the happiness of my beneficiary as a function of the X that I choose because I am the paternalistic altruist. I will give them a gift, X, and because of the gift or subsidy that I give them, then I get utility from how happy it makes them. So I have to be really smart at giving them the right gift, but if I do my shopping right, I will pick a good X for my beloved, and it will make them happy, and then I will become happy as a paternalistic altruist. So you see the ugly Christmas sweater. This happens all the time. We all give gifts to each other. And when we do that, we are being paternalistic altruists. Economists say, if you really want to make your beloved happy, give them pure cash. Venmo them. Don't go to Walgreens and buy them this ugly shirt. Think of the day after Christmas. On the day after Christmas, all of the stores around and are being swamped by people who want to give back their ugly Christmas shirts. Economists have calculated that the deadweight loss of Christmas, the difference between the utility of the altruist, pure altruist, and the utility of the paternal altruist, is about 10 to 30% of all of Christmas spending. About $40 billion down the toilet for all of these paternalistic altruists trying and failing to create happiness in their beneficiary. And the beneficiary takes it in their own hand and returns the ugly sweaters every year. So paternalistic altruism is, according to economics, foolish. Because if you wanted to make somebody happy, why would you pick the thing you give them? Just give them cash. So quiz question. True or false? Given the same amount of money, a pure altruist is more likely to achieve a higher utility of their beneficiary than a paternalistic altruist. I'll give you a moment. Okay, if you guessed that the paternalistic altruist is wasting their money in terms of creating happiness, you're right. That was, at Christmas time, $40 billion of wasting. Why does this happen? If we wanted to make other people happy, why wouldn't we all be pure altruists? Well, possible answers, I'm giving you two answers. A biological answer, answer A, says that in the course of evolution, humans were not designed to be altruistic towards non-kin. We only know how to be altruistic in families, and our quintessential altruistic relationship is that of a parent to a child. That is where we evolved to learn how to make another person happy. And in those situations, the parent actually has to be a paternalistic altruist. You don't take care of a 5-year-old by letting them eat ice cream all day. You have to say, I will make you happy in the way that I choose as a parent, and that has contaminated all other acts of interpersonal kindness. We cannot divorce our need to make others happy from this built-in neural pathway to be a parent to another person and pick the things that will make them happy. The economic answer is that there is participation utility, a different type of utility where your own personal involvement in the consumption act, in deciding what kind of ugly sweater to buy, makes that act of altruism more satisfying to you. That it is more, that feeling of generosity is more precious to you when you pick the sweater than when you give a gift card or just Venmo somebody and say, hey, go buy a sweater. Or just spend it. That is a new form of utility. So as we close this section, we're now opening our minds to beyond utilitarianism, where altruism is driven by 3 kinds of utility. Goods utility, which is the stimulation of the 5 senses through goods and services. Participation utility, where we get a satisfaction from feelings of connectedness from others, of being with them in the moment. And finally, identity utility, which is a satisfaction from saying, I am the sort of person who does this, says this, I'm in the tribe of people who live this way. A 3rd form of utility. So with these new thoughts of what utility can be, we're in a better position to understand why health disparities can be part of the social welfare function, because we are concerned with others through these 3 types of utility. And because we are concerned with the well-being of others, we can create social policies to try to make the health of others higher than it ordinarily would be. So in the next section, we're going to come back and talk about policies that can narrow health disparities.